National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
Pope Francis has brought changes to the Synod of Bishops only days before the Synod on Youth is expected to start in Rome in October. Does the Synod have new powers? What is its role in the Church? This week on Register Radio, we get answers from Register correspondent Edward Pentin. And then we turn to Joseph Pronechen, who'll talk to us about the Benedictine Institute, which is teaching sacred song to parishes and even within prisons. I'm Jeanette DeMelo, editor-in-chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio. I'm joined by Matthew Bunson, my co-host.
Good to be with you, as always.
Welcome, Matthew. So we're going to talk about this wonderful institute in San Francisco. It's named after Pope Benedict. It's helping Catholics to deepen their love of the sacred liturgy and music. And Joe Pronechen has a wonderful story to tell us about that. But first, we turn to Rome, and we talk to Edward Pentin about this Synod on Youth, which is fast approaching. And Pope Francis issued a document this week that makes some changes to the synodal process. Edward, welcome.
Hi, good to be with you again.
Edward, let's talk about this new document that Pope Francis issued on Tuesday. What's his basic message?
Right, yeah, well, this document called Episcopalis Communio, it's an apostolic constitution, so it's quite an important document. It carries quite a lot of legal weight. And what it does is essentially increase the authority of the Synod of Bishops, making it not quite a parliamentary body, but rather similar to it in the sense that it strengthens, as the Pope said, it strengthens, or what he wants to do is to strengthen the involvement of the people of God and further promote dialogue and collaboration between bishops and between bishops and the Pope. But what's interesting particularly about this document is, I think, that the final document of the Synod used to have no magisterial weight. It was just really sort of an advisory document that was given to the Pope to help him make a decision and to help his post-synodal apostolic exhortation, which is his sort of summary document of a synod. But the Pope has changed with this document the weight of that final document, and now it's going to have what he says is going to be part of the ordinary magisterium of the successor of Peter. So it's not quite the ordinary magisterium, which means it has a real teaching weight, but it is nevertheless, it does have more weight than it used to. Mm-hmm. So essentially he's going to, subject, of course, to the Pope's approval, it will have this extra authority, and that's quite a significant development, I think.
Very interesting. Matthew, you are our church historian. How does this new document, this new development, I guess, fit with the original idea for a synod?
Well, as Edward has been reporting, it marks a fairly significant change in, I think, the scope and ambition of certainly what Pope Francis wants to accomplish. When we go back to the original documents, say from 1965, when Pope Paul VI established it, when you go back and read that, you see that it was very clearly to be an advisory body to the popes. Francis, though, is also emphasizing the collegiality, the discussion, or as he likes to say, the synodality of the bishops coming together from around the world. And in that sense, I think he's expanding the opportunities for conversation, for listening. And I know that's something we're going to talk about in a second. But again, that advisory goal for Francis, but then also having the bishops from around the world come together, which I think is very clear in continuity with Pope Paul VI and to a large degree with Pope John Paul II.
Mm-hmm. So turning to that listening role, this is something that Pope Francis has stressed really from the beginning, that the church must be a listening church. This whole concept that he's had of synodality is one of listening and being with. He also has the concept of accompaniment that he's mentioned so frequently. What is he saying, Edward, in this constitution on listening?
Well, it's really, he puts great emphasis on the people of God, and he really wants the synods to become better, more open to what the world is like, the current challenges, and to try and find church solutions to that, or to try and have bishops understand better the current problems and challenges that the faithful face. And I think he's trying to do that with this document, and to try and make it more open to that. But the danger of this, and as we've seen over the past two synods, is that it's been criticized for perhaps serving to introduce sometimes using coercive or manipulative methods, worldly ways of thinking, which are at odds with the Church's perennial teaching, especially in the area of morality. And I think people are concerned, or have been concerned, that these synods under Pope Francis have been vehicles for that. And certainly there seems to be evidence to show it. And so I think this extra authority to the Synod of Bishops, and almost sort of formalizing that sort of process, I think has got some people quite concerned, and they're thinking, well, maybe this is just a way to sort of rubber stamp a more sort of a liberal sort of look of changing the Church. But we'll wait and see about that. But that certainly seems to be part of the reason for this, which is to try and bring in sort of modern ways of thinking, if you like, into the Church, and to try and change the Church, and as they would say, bring it up to date into the 21st century.
Have we heard analysis from canonists on whether something has changed in concrete from a practical, church law standpoint?
Well, I think it does supplant the previous canons, I believe, from what it used to be. Certainly as an apostolic constitution, it as I said earlier, it does carry some canonical weight. So I think it does. Certainly there are a whole series of articles in there, legal sort of terminology there. So I think it does do that. But the canons seem to remain the same in the Code of Canon Law. I don't think there's any changes there. But also the Pope Francis hasn't actually done anything that Paul VI didn't sort of suggest. He suggested back in 1965 that the Synod of Bishops could become deliberative, which is what Pope Francis has done, if the Pope wants that, and that's what he's done. It's never been done before, but the Pope Paul VI did, in fact, sort of foresee that possibly happening, and was okay with it. So, in a sense, he's just doing what had already been suggested.
Sure, and I haven't seen many people who have been surprised by what was in that document, because, as you've mentioned, it seemed in the 2014 Extraordinary Synod and the 2015 Synod that many of these elements had already been introduced in the way those synods were run, right?
Yes, and certainly that's the position of the Vatican, that they're saying there's nothing really new here for them in some ways, because a lot of the rules were already in place. One extra interesting point, which it's not really in the document, it's quite hidden away, and I think a lot of us missed it, which is that I believe that members of the or participants of synods who aren't priests are going to have votes
voting
in
power.
The final. Yes, but there was very little about the voting, and nothing very clear. It used to be 2/3 had to be a majority for every proposition to pass, but that wasn't even mentioned in the document. So there's a lot of unknowns about this, which I think may be done intentionally. I don't know, but we're going to find out pretty soon, I expect.
And Edward, it was somewhat conspicuous that they're granting wider privileges to the organizations of men religious, but not to the organizations of women religious. Is that right?
Yes, that was a point raised by a reporter at the press conference, and I think they've justified that in some way. I can't remember quite how, but that is true. Yes, there is that.
Will this document also impact the document that usually follows a synod into the post-synodal apostolic exhortation, such as Amoris Laetitia that followed the synods in 2014 and 2015? Because if I'm understanding this right, it is hypothetically possible for the Pope simply to put his signature to this final document coming out of his synod and use that as his exhortation. Would that be correct? That's
right, Matthew. Well, there is talk about that, yes. And some are saying, well, that's, perfectly all right. That's going to save quite a bit of work, and maybe that's the best thing to do. But I think that the question about the post-synodal apostolic exhortation was raised at the press conference, but the Cardinal Baldassari and the others kept saying, well, this isn't about that. It's about the synod itself. So they didn't really want to touch on that subject. And in a sense, it is kind of separate to the whole synodal process. But Yeah, we'll have to see. I think it's going to be left up to the Pope to decide, first of all, whether he wants to put his stamp on this final document and whether he wants to write an exhortation as well.
Well, so much still rides on, on the Holy Father and what he decides in these final, in the final stages of the synodal process. So we've got a synod coming up right now. It's to discuss youth, and there's already been a lot of controversy about that synod. Some of the elements that were introduced early in the process just seem to focus too heavily on LGBT issues or sociological issues, and not so much on traditional church themes of bringing others to Christ. But what have you heard since this document has been released regarding the Youth Synod?
Well, there's a question mark over actually whether this new document will apply to the new synod, because some say it's going to take some time for this to actually be put into practice. So we're going to have to see, I think, whether this actually is going to be applied. Certainly, it's interesting that it's come out just a couple of weeks before the synod begins, but I think there's all the structures and everything's in place for the synod coming up. So I think probably they're going to carry on much as they have with the previous two synods on the family, and with the same sort of procedures. But we'll know soon enough whether that's true or not. That's right.
And that begins October 4th. And during that time, Matthew, we've also got a canonization, right?
We do. October 14th, Pope Blessed, soon-to-be Pope Saint Paul VI, along, of course, with Oscar Romero and I think 6 or 5 other saints. And I think all eyes are turning toward that canonization to see what Francis has to say about Paul VI in the midst of a synod.
That's right. And is it the tail end of the synod, or is that really right in the middle of it?
It's right in the middle of it, which is a little surprising because most were expecting that the canonization would come at the end, especially as a way of honoring Paul VI, who, of course, established the Synod of Bishops.
Well, Edward, as usual, thank you for your reporting. You're doing a great job for us. Our readers are appreciative, and they're constantly letting us know that they value your work. So we look forward to your continued coverage from Rome and also the coverage of the upcoming Youth Synod.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on.
When we come back, we talk to Register correspondent Joseph Pronechen about the Benedict XVI Institute in San Francisco. This is Register Radio on EWTN.
Have you heard who's reading the Register? Why, it's Tim Staples.
The National Catholic Register gives you the world's news like no other. Only NCR has a stable of writers steeped in good Catholic theology and philosophy to give you the news with proper perspective.
For a 3-month free subscription to the National Catholic Register, go to ncregister.com and click on the 3 months free banner or call 1-800-421-3230.
Bishop Robert Barron.
Just as Fulton Sheen used radio and TV in the last century, we need to continue to use Catholic radio to announce the Catholic faith in the public forum.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio. Now there's a fast and easy way to get in touch with EWTN. The EWTN Everything number. Call 1-800-447-EWTN to get the latest information on programming, special events, pilgrimages, and more. Our EWTN Family Viewer Services representatives are ready to help you with whatever your needs may be. The EWTN Everything number. 1-800-447-EWTN. EWTN.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Jeanette DeMelo, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register, and I'm with Matthew Bunson, my co-host. And we have Joseph Pronechen on the line. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you very much, Jeanette. Glad to be back.
So Joe is our longtime staff writer for the Register. He's recently written a wonderful story about this Benedict XVI Institute, which started a couple years ago, but is really getting into full force now, I think. Joe, this summer they had a wonderful plan to bring chant to parishes throughout the archdiocese out there in San Francisco, and you wrote a wonderful story about that. But let's talk a little bit about the mission of this group. I quote, "It's to open the door of beauty to God and bring people closer to Him and His church." That's a pretty tall order.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And Archbishop Cordileone, when I spoke to him, said that the three things we look for or that bring people to God are truth, goodness, and beauty. And Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI has mentioned that more than once. And Archbishop Cordileone said that goodness we have in so many projects, helping the poor and so on, so it's easy for people to see that. And truth we have in the Bible, in the Gospels, in so many other study groups, studies that people can avail themselves of in the church and in the catechism and so on. But there isn't as much in the line of beauty, so that's why he wanted that's the only door some people will walk through. Mm-hmm. To get them to the other two doors. And so that's why he decided to really bring this out to the laity, the Benedict XVI Institute, in the line of music, and that's what they're focusing on strongly at the beginning now. And then they're going to have they already started an online arts magazine that concentrates on living Catholic artists and the work that they are doing now in various artistic disciplines. And then they are going to bring this not just to adults, but down to children also, and as their chant camp has proven this past summer.
So let's start from the beginning. Who leads this? Obviously, it's Archbishop Salvador Cordileone in the Archdiocese of San Francisco that has founded it. But who's the director?
The director is a woman named Maggie Gallagher. He has her, and they consult regularly. I believe I was informed weekly they consult on this, and she kind of oversees everything going on. And there's a woman named Rebecca Wu, W-U, who is the musical director. So those two seem to be in the primary lead at this particular point, overseeing everything.
And so I loved that your story focused on bringing chant into a prison. How did that happen?
Archbishop Cordileone told me that last Mother's Day, he had stopped at the prison to, I guess, visit the prisoners and see the chaplain there. And when he mentioned about the Benedict XVI Institute, the chaplain immediately said the men love to sing, and he realized that himself from his other visits there, the Archbishop did. And he says he would love to have the men learn chant. And immediately, 25 of them, the prisoners, signed up to learn chant. And Rebecca Wu said to me after, when they went with her, she went there with her professional singers. She uses 4 professional singers to help the people learn chant very quickly. And she says the men were just thrilled, and she was just thrilled at their reaction. And they had a couple of rehearsals, and they sang for a solemn high mass in the extraordinary form chant.
Really?
Yeah, and she says they just loved it, and they said, like one prisoner said, he felt really the Holy Spirit was shaking him up there a little bit, and especially when he got to those "Lord have mercy on me, a sinner," the translated line saying that. So, and that's been a high point right from the beginning. That was the first choir to sing this past spring. In chant form.
Wonderful. And of course, your story begins with this cute line about what do 25 San Quentin inmates and 30 missionaries of charity have in common. And of course, we already started down that track, so we know that it's the chant. Well, how did the missionaries of charity come into the picture?
Maggie Gallagher was telling me that the missionaries, they asked also about learning chant, and they taught the 30 missionaries of charity in their area to chant their divine office, They wanted to learn that. And also, and I didn't get the smallest details on this, but they, for children, they're running an Our Lady of Fatima group or camp, and they want to bring this chant to children, too, through that Our Lady of Fatima program that they have. So they're not only wanted it for themselves to begin with, for their own prayer life, but then to bring it out to others.
Well, so that our readers know where to go to find out more information about this wonderful Benedict XVI Institute and their work in really drawing people to the beauty of the Catholic worship, they can go to benedictinstitute.org. So that's benedictinstitute.org. And also, Joe's story is titled Benedict XVI Institute Choir Teaches Sacred Song. And this is running in our upcoming issue of the Register and will be online soon. So it's the September 30th edition of the Register that will feature this wonderful story along with some pictures. So Joe, it's really great when we're able to highlight something in our church that is ages old, and
yes, it is,
and has always drawn people closer to God and into solitude and just knowing God's presence. So I hope that many people can partake of this wonderful work that they're doing.
Yes, it's a wonderful avenue, a wide avenue that Archbishop Corleone is opening for people in his archdiocese.
Well, Joe,
and ultimately, if I can add, he hopes that this will catch on around the United States. So this is going to be kind of the model he would like for others, hopefully, to follow in the future.
Wonderful.
Well, Joe, while we have you, we also want to talk about a couple of pieces you've done on a Marian response to the scandal of sin, and another beautiful piece, Our Lady of Akita, Japan, and Today's Crisis. I love the idea of turning to the Blessed Mother in times of crisis, which is what all of us should be doing.
Exactly. She told us at Fatima, and it should have been, sorry to use the phrase drummed into people's heads, but it should have been drummed into people on the 100th anniversary that she says only she can bring peace. God has given her the role to her, and she told us exactly how to do that. And it's not all that difficult, it seems, but pray the rosary daily for peace. Offer up sacrifices for the conversion of sinners. Consecrate yourself to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So these are all simple things, and just our daily duties, she said, at another point, can be the sacrifice. Sometimes we moan and groan, a number of people do, maybe all of us at one time or another, about our daily duty, but if we try to do that with a little bit of cheerfulness or without moaning and groaning and offer it up and say, well, Lord, this is for the conversion of sinners, as she said, and for the sins committed against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. It would go a long, long way with heaven. Sometimes we look for the, like Naaman, we look for some spectacular way to be healed. Whereas when the prophet Elisha told him, well, just go dip yourself, 7 times in the Jordan, and he got angry with that. He said, that's too simple. But then finally he was talked into it. What happened? He was totally cured. So this is, the Blessed Mother wants to keep it simple for everyone, whether you're young, old, or what.
That's right. That's right. And this article is trending on our website, this article that you wrote, Our Lady of Akita, Japan, and Today's Crisis. And it's just a sign that our readers, the faithful, are hungry for things that they can do. We have spoken out. We have expressed a righteous anger over what has happened, and we should continue to do that. But one of the things that we can always do, and we must always do, to especially keep ourselves in tune with God's love and His mercy, is to pray. And so, Joe, many people are doing that. We can tell by the way that they have responded to your article. And, of course, there's another event coming up in October, the U.S. Rosaries Coast to Coast. So this is a big event planned for, October 7th?
7th, yes, Feast Day of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary.
And what are the elements of this event?
The elements are they want people to pray in groups, if possible, no matter where you are, at the 4 o'clock hour, 4 o'clock Eastern time. So those in Mountain Time, those in Central Time and Pacific Time would have to adjust their schedules to coincide the 4 o'clock hour for the power of such combined prayer. And they ask people to pray the rosary then. You could pray individually, obviously. You could pray at home if you can't get out. They're asking people to pray, if they can, at their state capitol. Or pray in the church, pray in your parish, get a little group together. And if just raise your voices to heaven to ask for peace to come to our country and stability to come to our country. In a sense, goes back to Lepanto again, and which would be the Feast of Our Lady of the Most Holy Rosary that was instituted because of the victory attributed to Our Lady in the Rosary back in the 1500s. So this was also preceded by a 54-day Rosary Novena, which interestingly began August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption, and ends on October 7th, so exactly 54 days. And it wasn't, it's not, I could put it this way, 100% necessary that you join to that part of it. But if you can jump in, if people can, and say a rosary every day for peace for our nation, that just adds extra, so to speak, to it.
Absolutely. So people can find out more information about this coastal rosary at rosarycoasttocoast.com. You can also search Rosary Coast to Coast on our website, and you'll come up with Joe's blog and article on this that gives you the whole information, all this information about Lepanto and the victory of Lepanto that happened on October 7th, 1571, the Feast of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary. Joe, as always, thank you for bringing to our readers and to our listeners this bit of deep Catholic culture that keeps us rooted in worship and close to Our Lady and our Lord. Thanks for all you do.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to do it, Jeanette.
Remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Make sure you go to our podcast section. You can listen to all of our Register radios there. Thanks for joining us here on Register Radio on EWTN. For Matthew Bunson and our producer, Jeff Burson, I'm Jeanette DeMelo. Until next week, God bless you.